So wealth management is a whole nother ring. But the most important ring, and actually the place that we like to start the whole financial planning discussion, is what we call life planning. Now, if you're like me, I'm a numbers guy, I play chess, I love strategy games. Life planning is a little too fuzzy, and it's a little too touchy-feely for a lot of people. But it's at the central core of what you are and who you do. So if you have more money than you'll ever need, and you have no children and no charitable causes that you support, who do you leave your money to in your estate plan? If you have none of that, if you value nothing, who do you leave your money to? You leave your money to the state, you help pay off the national debt. I don't know what you do with it. It doesn't matter, sort of. If you have no values, the money is just a placeholder for our values, and the money is only in service in as far as it is furthering things that we value. So now, I've never had a financial planning client yet that fell in that category. I had one person I met who came close, had very little charitable giving, no children, and to him, the only value he had was keeping score as to how well he did in the markets. And so he just liked to have a good score every year, and that was kind of his hobby. But other than that, investing in the markets and actually making money didn't have a whole lot of value. So, and I kind of thought that was sad, but sometimes you meet people like that where it's all about keeping score, and that's kind of a sad state. We don't have a client like that, and so life planning becomes the most important piece. So how does once you've determined life planning, now all of a sudden, investment management, you know how to do it. Because life planning filters back into all of the lower rings. Take for example, a simple question, risk versus return. So risk, I don't want to be risky, I'll put it all in bonds. Return, I'd like to be a bit risky, I want to make a lot of money, so I'll put it all into emerging markets. How do you balance risk and return? Where do you fall on the continuum of that? Well, it's very much like, well, what is your goal? So imagine that your goal is you had to drive to this meeting. What speed did you drive to this meeting? How many of you sped to this meeting because you were late and you valued getting here on time over the risk of maybe getting a ticket or being in an accident? How many of you left at 8 o'clock this morning so that you could drive 5 miles an hour and still make it here on time? Risk and return. All depends on how you value two different values. Getting here on time, leaving a lot of time. I was here very early because I wanted to make sure all the technology worked. And I hate standing in front of people and saying, well, my slides don't work, and I don't know how anything works, and I'm completely unprepared. So I like to get to a talk early, especially if I haven't talked to that group before and I don't know my equipment's going to work. And we hook it up, and the projector was on ceiling mount, which of course is the image upside down. And so fortunately, I did one button press and it all works, but you want to make sure that you have enough time to make that a 5-minute or 10-minute process to make sure the picture goes right. So it's all risk and return. And just like that, once you figured out what your goals are and what you value, then you filter that back in, and then you can provide investment management. Because supposing someone has more money than they'll ever need, well, they can be as risky as they want, they can be as safe as they want. It doesn't matter. Because they're not going to use the money in their lifetime. Being very safe might allow them to help sleep at night, might allow them to be calm, they know the money's secure, they know it's not going to go very many places. Being more risky, on the other hand, might be appropriate because you're managing it for their children. And their children are very young, and so they can have an aggressive portfolio because you're managing it for children or grandchildren. So the more frugal you are, the more it opens up possibilities, and then your life planning values really matter. Maybe you're just on the edge and you have just enough money for your retirement and it's just going to make it. In that case, you have to have enough appreciation to keep up with inflation and make sure that it continues to grow, and enough stability so the next 5 to 7 years is all secure so that you don't have to spend if it goes down. So you set aside some for the next 5 to 7 and you put the rest on the growth side to keep up with inflation, and you're trying to keep that balance and you're driving just the right speed. Because there's a Mack truck behind you that's going to hit you if you go too slow, and you're not going to make it because the bridge is collapsing unless you get off the bridge in time. And so you've got the perfect speed that you've got to go at, to make it work. So that's the idea between risk and return. You have to balance it based on life planning issues, and they only become open when you're very, very frugal in relation to your net worth. So what I like to say is, if you don't have any goals, well, then you're there. It works. So it's like a blank Rubik's Cube. You can't go wrong if you don't have any goals, because you won't miss any of them. Okay, so what I'd like to go through is I'd like to go through 3 life planning questions. And these are questions that are used by financial planners to do this life planning fuzzy area. And they're intended to be done over a period of time. You're supposed to do the first one, and then you're supposed to do the second one, and then you're supposed to do the third one. I'm going to give them all to you in an hour, and so it requires a little bit more thought and reflection. And so you may want to go back and do each one a little bit slower and think through it. And you may be interested in just hearing about what other people have come up with for the various issues. So life planning question number 1, and I'll read you the full version. Imagine you're financially secure, that you have enough money to take care of your needs now and in the future. How would you live your life? Would you change anything? Let yourself go. Don't hold back on your dreams. Describe a life that is completely and richly yours. So in other words, if you had all the time or money you needed, what would you do with it? What would you do with all the money you ever needed? So a lot of people like to play this game. If I had $1 million, I would, or nowadays because of inflation, if I had $10 million, I would, because $1 million doesn't go as far as it used to, and so now $10 million is the new million. In fact, $1 million in 1970 is the equivalent of $5.5 million today. And $1 million today is the equivalent of about $170,000 in 1970. That's how much inflation has changed. And if you were to tell my grandmother, who was born in 1904 and lived to be 99 and a half, if you were to have told her that she needed hundreds of thousands of dollars for her retirement, she would have just looked at you and shook her head. And she always tells the story of the most important loss she ever occurred, financial loss, was when she lost $1 in the Depression and had to put back 25% of her groceries because she only had $3 and she had lost the fourth. So you compare that loss. Today a $10,000 loss would not have would not be half as much. So it's all relative to what the dollar means and what the value is, how much the loss really matters.